Hello and welcome to Bionicle Autopsy, the series where we'll be cutting through Bionicle piece by piece and analyzing recent events, themes, and issues that have been affecting the Bionicle community today. Now recently, a fellow biotuber by the name of iBionicles posted a monthly contest, and the requirements are to basically go to LEGO.com and file a complaint. And in that complaint, he wants you to say, "Bring back Bionicle!" He also wants you to record a video of yourself describing the impact Bionicles had on your life, and he plans to compile all the entries and send it off to LEGO in a campaign to get Bionicle back. Now obviously he's received quite a lot of backlash from the Bionicle community at large, and it's really no surprise. If you've followed the Bionicle community for a while now, you've probably heard something like this before. Ever since Bionicles announced cancellation back in 2009, there have been crazy fanatics all over the BZ Power community and, the LEGO community as a whole, saying how awesome Bionicle was, how it was the greatest toy line, and that LEGO should bring it back, that they're in the wrong for canceling it, yada yada yada. There have been several different campaigns to get it back, such as petitions and groups and letters, and each and every single one of these are faced with a similar outcome. They never work, and they usually receive a lot of backlash from the Bionicle community. Now, in theory, these ideas sound pretty decent. If Bionicle was cancelled due to lack of consumer interest, then surely showing LEGO that there are consumers out there and that there is a market willing to buy their product would help convince them to re-release it. The issue is, Bionicle wasn't cancelled due to lack of consumer interest. It was cancelled for a lot of various other reasons, and mass spamming LEGO isn't going to change these reasons. And so, to help explain why it's not a good idea for Bionicle to be coming back, one has to understand why Bionicle was cancelled to begin with. First of all, the story was just far too complex. This is a decade-long tale that branched off with so many side stories and multiverses that it contradicted itself more than Karzani. The likelihood of new consumers actually getting into this product's tale is really unlikely. And honestly, it's really hard to get a stable fan base if you don't even understand the story behind it. Unless I mention that Bionicle was also running out of a ton of ideas by the end of its line. Take a look at 2001 up to 2005. Every single set had a unique body design and a function. These functions were heavily engineered and really creative. And they stuck with the line up until 2006 when it was replaced by a bunch of gimmicky lights and glow-in-the-dark pieces. And one of the biggest offenders of these gimmicks was the idea of a blaster, which were around in the earlier years of Bionicle, but they were never really as prevalent as they were in 2006 and onwards. Only a few characters usually even carried those. Here, every single hero and every single villain had a Zamra launcher in 2006, and at the time it was really cool. However, it kept appearing year after year after year. One melee weapon and one launcher. You had the Kordak Blaster, the Squid Launcher, the Midax Sky Blaster, the Thornax Launcher, the Niran Ghost Blaster, and then also the Air Launcher, which was basically just a retooled Zamra launcher. In fact, it looked exactly the same with recolored Zammers. And then there was the infamous Anika build. Looking back at 2001 to 2005 again, you'll also notice that the body designs were usually brand new and completely unique, with new pieces introduced to keep the consumer guessing and keep the building fun. Post 2006, you had the same body build for every single set. Seriously, look at the instructions from 2006 up to 2009. You have the Anika build in every single hero set. Now don't get me wrong, I know that some sets did have unique builds. There were a few breakout sets, especially the Baraki, for instance. They all had really unique builds and they were really creative. But for the most part, every single Toa had the same build. They were basically the Call of Duty of LEGO lines, and they were all the same thing, except retooled to be slightly better than the last year. And don't even get me started on that weird silver fetish LEGO had towards the end there. Simply, LEGO was just running out of ideas, and if you keep that in mind while also contributing to the fact that the story was completely overwhelming to any new person trying to get into the series, then you kind of understand just why Bionicle might have ended. It wasn't due to lack of consumer interest, it was because it was just too big for its own good. So, what better way to bring in the new consumers than a new IP? Introducing Hero Factory. Now keep in mind, Bionicle never really hit its target audience in the later years. Originally, it was intended for the younger audience, and most of its fans were people that grew up with it. Hero Factory was meant to be more accessible to the younger kids, because, well, Bionicle's story was completely confusing, and Hero Factories in comparison really isn't much. It's very, very simple. You have heroes, and you have villains. Heroes fight the villains. And with this new line came a new building system. Out went the old, tired Anika build and in with a new skeleton hero factory build. I don't even know what you call it, but think about if Bionicle were to be brought back now. First of all, it's going to have to compete with the new brand Hero Factory, and from the amount of advertising and plugging that LEGO's done for Hero Factory, I don't think Hero Factory is going anywhere anytime soon. If one of the reasons why Bionicle was cancelled was because it didn't appeal to younger audiences and that it was too confusing, the likelihood of it continuing its old story is very, very slim if it were to return. So that means we're probably going to be getting a completely revamped and rewritten story. Who knows, it might be similar to the old story, it might just be a reboot, but it definitely won't be the same. It'll probably be more kid-friendly because they're trying to appeal to a younger audience and also compete with Hero Factory. In fact, just look at all of LEGO's recent themes and trends and compare it back to their old lines. Back in the day, LEGO was really trying to push their Technic line with robo-riders and throwbots, and they were very similar to Bionicle in the fact that they were pretty complex yet simple at the same time, and very robotic with functions. They all basically had a similar premise, but they didn't really have much of a story either, and that's also something to consider here. But Technic was always about complex engineering and design to get to its basic functions, and it was very thought-intensive to actually build a lot of the sets. I mean, just look at Mindstorms, which was incredible. It combined like Technic and robotics to create these awesome sets, all but really expensive. Now compare this to today's world in LEGO, where we have lines like Ninjago and Chima. Chima, in fact, is probably the closest thing to Bionicle that's out there in LEGO right now, and just look how that's going. LEGO's basically dumbed down their style to make it more accessible to everyone, which to its older fans probably isn't really a good thing, but to the business standpoint, it's a very effective strategy. Needless to say, it doesn't seem like LEGO is going to be changing their theme or style anytime soon, and if you were to bring Bionicle back during this, it would be very kid-friendly, and it really would not be anything like the old Bionicle that we got in its heyday. And from the way LEGO's really been pushing this new style, it seems like they're going to be continuing these trends for a very long time to come. There's also been a rumor that originated from Eurobricks. There is a member there called Front, and he has been a known LEGO employee, set designer, and he's stated that the Bionicle parts are just melded down. That's why we don't see them in Hero Factory anymore, because Hero Factory has its own thing. Why would they need to use Bionicle parts? Bionicle's done. There's really no reason to keep these parts. They're not going to be using them anymore. So, melt them down, use them for something else. Now, this is just a rumor, and it's highly possible that it was all a joke, but if we were to take this in consideration, that means if Bionicle were to be re-released, it would not have any of the same old pieces. It more than likely would share a lot of its build with the Hero Factory sets, and if people are complaining about Hero Factory now, they're probably going to be complaining about Bionicle, because really, if Bionicle were to come back, it would just be a retool to Hero Factory. It would appeal to the younger audiences, and it would share a lot of the same pieces that Hero Factory has. Case in point, it really just isn't a good idea to bring Bionicle back at this time. It had its run, and it was running out of ideas at the very end anyway. Bringing it back would just, honestly, ruin the nostalgia of it. But say all of this was completely false, and LEGO did eventually bring it back, and it was, well, perfect. Mass spamming them a bunch of messages saying, bring back Bionicle, is not going to get the job done, and it's not going to make them want to. It just shows them how obnoxious the Bionicle community is. Why would they ever want to cater to someone who keeps bothering them and pestering them to do something they obviously don't want to do? They want to move on. And it's this reason why this campaign is such a bad idea to begin with. And I think most of the fans realize this, and that is why it's getting so much criticism. I mean, let's just face it, Bionicle probably isn't going to be coming back. So instead of trying to force its revival, how about we all come together as fans and just remember it? Because that's the best way to keep Bionicle alive. No radical ideas to get Bionicle back and force its revival is necessary, because if Bionicle were to come back, I want it to be something that LEGO wants to do, not something they've been forced into. If there's no drive, then there won't be any love or desire to continue it, and that's what made Bionicle so great to begin with, was the care and attention that they put into the series. So if you really want to, do as iBionicles says and make a video about Bionicle's impact on your life. Or make artwork, or write fanfiction. Just leave LEGO out of it. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. This has been Varderan cutting through Bionicle piece by piece. I'll be seeing you next week. Goodbye.